Lucky me, huh?
Yes.
Dude, what the heck's going on?
I tried.
Oh, man. It
I
like dug a
tried.
hole down there, man.
Yes.
Bummer, dude. We'll have to slice and dice it a little bit so that we can... does the mass still count if you can light it? I don't know if it does.
I said, despite the resistance of the candle, it is the fourth Sunday of Advent.
Well,
so
that's good. That's good. Technicalities, I suppose.
yes.
Yes, amen. Little child in the back. I agree. The little child was like, yes, it's still Sunday. Ah! Speaking of children, it's a good segue into something that I was pondering this week as I was just thinking about today's gospel between Mary and Elizabeth, which, one of the wonderful stories that we hear coming up to the Christmas season here in this fourth Sunday of Advent. And it reminds me recently of a wedding that I was at about a month ago down in Indianapolis for a good friend of mine and a family that I've come to know over the past few years. One of the children in the family, Tony, is what number is he? I think he's the fourth son of 11 children. There are 6 boys and 5 girls in this family. Tony, I know him, pardon me, because he and I were in seminary together. He's now Father Tony. He's a priest of the Archdiocese of Indianapolis. And his family, the Hollowell family, I've come to know through Tony. They're a great, great family, and I've been very privileged to celebrate with them some of the more recent weddings that they've had over the last few years. They are now on the 4th of 5 daughters who've been married, and this most recent one with Maria, she's actually the youngest daughter. Maria was marrying a wonderful man named Matthew, and so I went down in November to celebrate the wedding and be there for the weekend. Awesome time. One thing about the Hollowell family is that they really know how to throw a good party. So it's going to be, I knew I had a lot to look forward to. And as it turns out, I think Maria's husband, Matthew, is one of like 8 or 9. He comes also from a big family. So this was a huge wedding. And inevitably, one of the realities of a huge wedding with lots of children is that at this point, there are now lots of grandchildren. So like dozens, of like little kids just flying around everywhere in the church, at the reception. Well, it was a wonderful wedding. And the reception was also a lot of fun. My favorite part of the entire reception was the part where Maria and Matthew had their first dance. And what made it so fun and memorable to me was not so much about Maria and Matthew, but about observing all of the dozens of little kids as they witnessed this unfold. Because here's the scene. So at the wedding reception, all of the tables are sort of around here and around here and around here. And in the middle is the big dance floor, which at the beginning of the reception is filled with tables for the food lines to make it simple for people to get through and eat while the food's still hot. And that was great. And then at a certain point, as people finish their meal, we know it's time for the next thing in the wedding, which is the dancing. And naturally, all of the workers have to clear away the tables. Now, when the workers clear away the tables and all of the food, this like triggers every child at the wedding reception, because they know that something awesome is about to happen next. Whenever a little child is in the middle of something that looks vast and empty, they can't help themselves because they just need to go run around wherever that empty space is. And they know that we're all about to start dancing. But the really memorable part about it is that they can't do it yet. And this just kills them. Because moms and dads are like, no, you can't. You have to wait. You can't go on the dance floor yet. Uncle Matt, Aunt Maria, they haven't done their first dance. You have to wait. And so watching the children wait for Matthew and Maria to finish their first dance is hilarious. Because we all know what little girls do who can't dance and what little boys do who aren't allowed to run around. Right? The little girls will stand there and mom says, don't dance. And they're like, okay. So then they just go like, they're just waiting. And some of them are just kind of like, how like they'll do like this. And the little boys, of course, who aren't allowed to run, and mom and dad say, don't run. And so what they do instead is they run, but with their hands at their sides. but they're not running because their hands are at their sides. I don't know. And they're all just like got like rocket engines on their back, just like, is it time? Are we ready? Can we do it? Can we go? Not yet. They can't handle it. And so they're, of course, not really watching Uncle Matt or Aunt Maria at all. They're just like, when can I get on the floor? You just get this sense from all the kids of like, we're in a hurry. Go ahead and wrap it up because we got things to do. And of course, it's a great wedding. They know how to throw a great party. So by the end of Matthew and Maria's dance, not only did all the kids fly out on the dance floor, but the whole family did. I mean, it was just an awesome, crazy, awesome party. It's an example to me of maybe something a little bit like when we hear of Elizabeth and Mary, and there's this interesting tidbit of information that we find out that Mary isn't just going to visit Elizabeth, but there's this haste. She's like, I'm in a hurry. I got to go now. And just like that scene, right, with little children who like notice the change happen, and that change signifies something really good that's about to come. And they're like in a hurry for it to arrive already. And they just can't wait. And they're trying to pace back and forth and trying to keep themselves still, and they can't hardly do it. Because sometimes this is how the good things come. We anticipate. We want it to come sooner. And even on the outside, right, when I'm just sort of sitting there at the side of the dance floor observing all of these kids, there's something really infectious about that as well for all of us. We just kind of observe that, and it brings us, I think, more deeply, more fully into the moment, right? It kind of unifies, doesn't it? The sense of haste that comes to us when we know something good's about to happen. And I know that this is a big part of this gospel story, right? In the fourth Sunday of Advent, when we talk about like the proximity of the blessing. We're now a week away from Christmas. And in these last 5 days, in these last 6 days, what are we thinking about? How are we preparing? What are we getting ready for? Do we want it to come sooner? Maybe we're like, it's too soon. I haven't enough time. I still need to shop. You know, we might be going through all sorts of places, all sorts of experiences. But there's something more that's happening. You know, the way that the Lord works in Elizabeth's life and in Mary's life is oftentimes how he works in all of our lives. This is one of the ways that we discern how God is the principal mover, which is that we seem to be going away, and then Jesus brings a grace and it actually changes the course of things, and we go a different way. And this is exactly what we see happen in the gospel. Mary's life goes away in a particular direction. God comes in, changes her life, and it's never going to be the same now. And it's going to move somewhere new. And we can all, perhaps, I think, maybe recall in our own lives those moments, those big changes where our lives, the trajectory was now different. It was now new. And this is maybe one of the ways that we knew that this was from the Lord, because we certainly wouldn't have been able to come to that on our own or move that way on our own. But there's something more perhaps as well that's revealed to us in this story of Mary and Elizabeth, particularly about being hasty, about being in a hurry, that's worth considering, not only as we enter more closely to Christmas, but also as we move in our life of faith with God and grow in our relationship with God. Because one of the important pieces of information as well that precedes this story, these verses, so what's just happened? What's just happened is that the archangel Gabriel has come down in Revelation to Mary saying, Mary, your life is going to change. All of the tables are now set aside. You can see it before your eyes. And Mary, because she wants to do God's will, of course, is ready for this grace. But God, in his goodness towards Mary, doesn't simply say, your life is going to change, get ready. In the conversation with the archangel Gabriel, Gabriel says to Mary, and also behold, your cousin Elizabeth is already 6 months pregnant. She who is unable to conceive, who is too old to conceive, because nothing is going to be impossible for God. And it is after that second revelation that Mary says, behold, I'm the handmaid of the Lord, be it done to me according to your own word. And this is, I think, a real insight to us. Why was Mary in such haste to meet Elizabeth? Well, because one of the ways that God's grace moved in Mary's life was not simply to show her that he was ready to do something new right now. And he says, oh, by the way, look at what I have already done to prepare for this moment now. God doesn't simply move by giving us a grace for the moment in which it occurs. Every grace in your life is prepared beforehand. God doesn't simply plop in at a second and say, let's try this now. God says, I know I'm going to do this then, so I'm going to do all of these things beforehand, even to get ready for that moment. And this is what we see unfold in the story between Mary and Elizabeth. And why does God do that? Why is he interested in giving graces as a preparation for another grace later? Because I think God is very interested in showing each of us that he's faithful. God really wants to show himself faithful. And one of the ways that he shows himself faithful is by having us consider, see what I've already done. Look at the way I've made you ready for this. And in fact, you couldn't have even known it at the time, but now you know it, and now you see it in a way you couldn't see it before, and now it makes sense. It wasn't only a revelation that Mary was going to be pregnant with the Messiah, it was also a revelation to her that God had done something 6 months ago that she's just now finding out about. And it's just not an extra piece of information. It has everything to do with Mary's grace as well. It has everything to do with Mary's ability to also accept what God is going to do in her life. And maybe you've had that experience. Perhaps if we've lived life long enough, we could always go to one of those moments. Have you ever been in a place, for example, where you felt confused about what God may have done or not done, allowed or not allowed? You have felt maybe even discouraged or miffed. Like, why didn't you answer my prayer? Why did you let this happen? And in the moment, we're just simply not able necessarily to understand. However, it might so happen that later on down the line, a few years later in life, we look back upon that moment and we're like, oh. Because God has now met us in this future time in a way that brings light to the previous time. So that God reveals to us, no, I was faithful to you. Even if in the moment you didn't see it, I reveal that understanding to you now after the fact. Because I want you to know that I'm faithful to you. And then sometimes we look back on that moment, and in the moment we might have been upset about it, but later on we're like, oh, thank God. Thank God he didn't listen to me. Or thank God he answered it differently than the way that I wanted, because it was better. Because it actually prepared me for this moment, which is even more what I wanted. And he was willing to hear me. And I didn't know it then, but now I know it. All of that dynamic is in our life of faith. Not simply because, as we said, right, God says, well, I'm just going to throw something there, and throw something there, and we'll get there eventually. But because God already foresees your future, and he gives us preparatory graces now, even if we don't know it until later, so that when the later arrives, he says, and look at what I've already done. And so can you respond to me now in this present moment? I just think that's incredible. And I think it's important not simply to think of this as this one-off story of this one-of-a-kind, never to be repeated circumstance, but the truth that it's a pattern. It's a pattern of the way that God moves. God moves in our lives, all of us, in this way. And maybe that's an important way that we prepare this proximate moment where we're getting close to the good thing. The dance floor is cleared away. We know it's about to happen. And how do we enter more fully into the good gifts that are coming down the pipeline? Sometimes in life, you have to look backward in order to move forward. Sometimes in our life of faith, we have to consider what God has already done in order to know and accept what God is about to do. And if any of us look on any significant moments in our lives, chances are, if we think hard enough about those moments where we were going this way and then life changed, we can go back to that moment and see then the path behind it in a different light. What did God do in the heart of your wife before she was betrothed to you that prepared her to be married to you that day? What did God do in the heart of your husband previous to that your marriage to him that prepared him to be ready to say yes to that moment? Who was that teacher in your life who understood you in a different way in middle school that really changed your ability to pursue a subject or to pursue an interest that propelled you in a future career moment? What did God do in your life before you had that first child that really made you ready in a way that you didn't find out about until after you had your child? All kinds of things. What did God do in your life 10 years ago that helped you prepare for that really difficult moment 5 years ago? That helped you persevere through that hard time that you wouldn't have been able to do had not God already made you ready? That's all over our lives. His fingerprints are there to be remembered, to be considered again. And maybe that's just the offering for us today, the invitation for us today. That it is important for us in our journey of faith to walk backwards with God in such a way that we can better walk forwards with him. And to thank God for the revelations that even come to us after the fact, so that God can remind us he was with you, step for step, breath for breath. At no point were you abandoned, even if it had not yet been revealed to you, even if the understanding wasn't there yet. God was still getting you ready for something better yet to come. And if that's been true of our past, do we make a decision now then to surrender to God more deeply for the sake of our future? Because I believe that would be his invitation to us at every moment between now and the moment that we step over the threshold of death. God's never done doing something new in us. And he's always helping us along the way to be ready for the things that are yet to come by inviting us to consider what he's already done.